Next, we have the duality of self versus other, or self versus world. I've already touched on this, but there's a lot that could be said about this, because this is perhaps one of the most fundamental dualities that you hold. It's the duality that is responsible for running your entire life. Is the distinction you make between yourself and everything else. In fact, this distinction is how you were born. You were not born biologically or physically. You were born the moment that a distinction between you and not you occurred. And see, I said in the past, I think I said in the last part 2 of this series, that what a duality is, it's a division within consciousness. So when we make a division, like if we cut an apple in half, simultaneously we're creating 2 parts. That's what a division is. A division always creates 2 parts. Now, of course, you can have multiple divisions creating more than 2 parts, but each division is making 2 parts. So the very first division that you made to come into existence is the division between me and not me. Me and world. Me and another person. The only way that you exist as a self, as an ego that you imagine yourself to be, is because you tell yourself that you're that and not the rest of the world. If you told yourself that you were the rest of the world and that would remove the division between world and self, literally you would become the whole world. You see? But you can't even fathom what I'm saying right now in your present state of consciousness, unless maybe you're already enlightened, because you are so certain that you're real. You're so certain that you're actual. You're so certain that the division between self and other and self and world is actually real. But you have to realize, like we said earlier, that the duality between actual and real is itself untenable and must collapse. So when you realize this, you'll die. When you realize that there's no difference between self and the world, you'll die. Which is precisely why you're going to do everything in your power not to realize it. So even though I'm telling you all this and you're understanding it intellectually, you're not actually going to realize it. Because if you realized it, you'd be dead. And then you'd be awake. And then you'd be immortal. And then you'd be God. And then you'd be absolute. And then you'd be infinite. But of course, your entire life is predicated upon you not being that. Your whole life is devoted to you being finite and limited and your particular self. That's all that you've been doing in your whole life. So are you going to give that up simply because you watched one of my videos? Of course not. You're terrified of doing what I'm telling you to do. It is totally terrifying because you think it's going to destroy your entire life because you think that death is actually real. You see how this duality works? Your entire sense of reality and self and life is completely corrupted by these dualistic divisions that you've made. And that's as it should be, because if you didn't have those, you couldn't be alive. So as it should be. But also realize that it's possible to transcend that if you want. That's what awakening is about. So yeah, this is very, very tricky stuff. I mean, like this is some of the most advanced and subtle things that could ever be communicated to a human being, from one human being to another. I'm making it sound kind of easy. I'm being kind of flippant. I'm going through it kind of fast, and I'm kind of smiling through it because, you know, once you get on the other side of it and you understand it and you have a lot of familiarity with it, like I have at this point, then, you know, it becomes totally normal to you, and there's nothing weird about it, nothing crazy about it. But when you're first hearing it for the first time, or even for the 100th time before you've actually done any practices or had any direct experiences of it, it sounds like lunacy, and it sounds dangerous and crazy, and like Yeah, people don't realize how radical this work is and how radical awakening is and how radical non-duality is. People think that, oh, non-duality is just some interesting theory I listened to on YouTube. No, non-duality is it's the end of your life. It's the end of your life. It's the end of the world. It's the end of reality. As you realize that all those things were conceptual the entire time.